The man who is actually running Iran is dead, not the supreme leader who was assassinated on day one of this war, not the military commanders who fell in the opening strikes on February 28th. Ali Larijani, the 67-year-old official who had become the single most powerful surviving figure in the Iranian government, the man who Haaretz called the country's most powerful man, the man the Australian described as the de facto wartime leader of Iran, the man who the New York Times said had effectively been running the country since January, was killed overnight in a targeted Israeli airstrike deep inside the Iranian capital, Tehran. Israel's Defense Minister Israel Katz confirmed it on Tuesday morning. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu released a pre-recorded video address, and his office published a photograph of him personally on the phone ordering the strike. In the same overnight operation, Israel also announced it had killed Gholam Reza Soleimani, the 6-year commander of the Basij paramilitary force, Iran's feared internal security militia that crushes protests and maintains the regime's iron grip on the Iranian people. Two of the highest-ranking surviving figures in the Iranian government, both eliminated in a single night of precision operations in the heart of the Iranian capital. Day 18 of this war just became the most consequential single day since it started. To understand why this killing reshapes everything about this war, you need to understand who Ali Larijani actually was, not just as a title or a position, but as a person and as a power. Because the answer to that question explains why today changes everything. Larijani was born in 1958 in Najaf, Iraq, into one of the most prominent clerical families in the Islamic world. His father was a senior religious scholar with direct ties to Ayatollah Ruhollah Khomeini, the founder of the Islamic Republic. Larijani came of age during the Islamic Revolution of 1979. He fought as a commander in the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps during the Iran-Iraq War in the early 1980s. He headed Iran's state television and radio broadcaster IRIB for an entire decade from 1994 to 2004, during which time he turned it into a powerful conservative platform that served Khamenei's ideological agenda without question. He was Iran's chief nuclear negotiator from 2005 to 2007, leading talks directly with Britain, France, Germany, and Russia during the most critical phase of the early nuclear crisis. He served as Speaker of Iran's parliament for 12 consecutive years from 2008 to 2020, making him one of the longest-serving parliamentary leaders in the Islamic Republic's history. During that time as Speaker, he played the decisive role in getting the 2015 nuclear deal, the JCPOA, past the parliamentary finish line. International analysts described him at the time as the indispensable bridge between Iran's hardliners and the pragmatic wing of the government. He was, in the words of Ali Vaez of the International Crisis Group, a true insider, a canny operator, and someone uniquely familiar with how the entire Iranian system operates. And then he came back. After being blocked from running for president twice, once in 2021 and again in 2024, both times by the Council of Guardians in moves widely seen as political sidelining, Larijani was reappointed in August 2025 as Secretary of the Supreme National Security Council in the immediate aftermath of the 12-day war that June. That reappointment was significant. It signaled that Khamenei recognized he needed Larijani's specific combination of skills more than ever. The Supreme National Security Council is the body that makes Iran's most consequential decisions. It coordinates defense strategy, nuclear policy, foreign intelligence, and every dimension of national security. As its secretary, Larijani was effectively the chief executive of Iran's entire security apparatus. He traveled to Oman in February 2026 to prepare for the indirect nuclear talks with U.S. negotiators that ultimately failed to prevent this war. He made multiple trips to Moscow to manage the security relationship with Putin. He negotiated the 25-year strategic cooperation agreement with China. He was, in the weeks and months before February 28th, the most active Iranian diplomat on the planet. And then the war began. When Khamenei was killed in the very first wave of U.S.-Israeli strikes on February 28th, Larijani moved with remarkable speed to fill the void. Within 24 hours, he appeared on Iranian state television declaring that America and Israel had set the heart of the Iranian nation ablaze, and warning that Iran would make them regret their actions. On March 1st, he announced the formation of an interim leadership council to manage the country, while the succession process for a new supreme leader unfolded. He became the public face of Iranian resistance, appearing at pro-government rallies in Tehran on March 13th, just 4 days before his killing, visible on the streets, projecting defiance at a moment when the new supreme leader Mojtaba Khamenei had not been seen in public since his appointment. While Mojtaba remained completely invisible, wounded according to American officials and likely disfigured according to Defense Secretary Hegseth, Larijani was everywhere. He was giving statements to the media. He was warning Trump directly. He issued a message telling Trump to take care of yourself, not to be eliminated, telling him that Iran does not fear empty threats and that even greater powers have failed to erase the Iranian nation. He was the one person in Iran's leadership structure who was simultaneously running security operations, managing what remained of Iran's diplomatic relationships, coordinating with Russia, and presenting a coherent face of defiance to the world. Netanyahu himself, in his video statement on Tuesday, described Larijani as the boss of the Revolutionary Guards, the effective head of the gang that actually runs Iran. And now he is gone. Here is what makes the strategic picture after his death genuinely unprecedented in this war. When Khamenei was killed on day one, Iran had a plan ready. The system functioned. Within 10 days, they had installed Mojtaba Khamenei as the new supreme leader. Officials several layers below had already been designated as replacements for those killed. Iran's intelligence and security apparatus, deeply decentralized and built over decades specifically to survive exactly this kind of decapitation campaign, absorbed the shock and kept functioning. But there is a fundamental difference between replacing a supreme leader when the rest of the power structure is intact and trying to replace the man who was holding what remained of that power structure together while simultaneously conducting a war, managing a Strait of Hormuz blockade, coordinating drone operations across the Gulf, and dealing with the first ground invasion of Lebanon in years. Larijani was not just a position. He was the connective tissue of a system that had already lost most of its other key figures. The IRGC commander was killed on February 28th. The defense minister was killed on February 28th. The chief of staff of the armed forces was killed on February 28th. Intelligence chief, defense council secretary, military intelligence head, all dead. Larijani was the last senior civilian official with deep institutional knowledge, broad factional relationships across the Iranian system, and genuine credibility with both the clerical establishment and the military. He was irreplaceable in a way that most people in his position are not. The killing of Basij commander Gholamreza Soleimani in the same operation adds another dimension that is critically important and getting very little coverage. The Basij is the regime's internal enforcement army. It was under Soleimani's command that the Basij carried out the January 2026 crackdown that killed thousands of Iranian protesters in the largest uprising the country had seen since the Islamic Revolution. In January, just weeks before this war started, Iranians took to the streets in enormous numbers, demanding an end to the regime. Security forces, led by the Basij, responded with lethal force on a scale that shocked even veteran observers of Iranian politics. The U.S. sanctioned Larijani specifically for his role in directing that crackdown, identifying him as a central coordinator of the violence. And now both the man who ordered it and the man who carried it out on the streets are dead. The question of internal stability in Iran, while the country is simultaneously absorbing the most intense aerial bombardment in its history, has just become dramatically more uncertain. Netanyahu was explicit in his Tuesday statement about what Israel is trying to do. He said Israel is undermining the regime in the hope of giving the Iranian people the opportunity to remove it. He said it will not happen all at once and will not be easy, but that if Israel persists, it will give Iranians the chance to take their destiny into their own hands. This is not merely a military strategy. This is a stated regime change objective. Netanyahu is telling the Iranian people directly, as he has done in multiple video messages in Persian directed at Iranian civilians throughout this war, that the goal is to give them freedom from the system that has ruled them since 1979. Whether that strategy works depends on answers to questions that nobody outside Tehran can currently answer with confidence. Does the population see this as liberation or as foreign aggression? Do the institutional layers of the IRGC below the killed commanders hold together or fracture? Is there a figure within the system with enough authority and credibility to step into Larijani's role and hold the decision-making structure together? The Jerusalem Post analysis pointed to Ahmad Vahidi, the IRGC deputy chief who became the new IRGC leader after Mohammad Pakpour was killed on February 28th, as a potential new center of power. But Vahidi was not a known name even in Iranian security circles before he emerged in this role. He lacks the decades of relationship building across factions that made Larijani indispensable. He lacks the parliamentary history, the nuclear negotiating experience, the diplomatic network across Russia, China, and the Gulf states. He is a military commander stepping into a role that requires a political operator of the highest order. And Iran's political situation right now does not easily allow for on-the-job learning. Meanwhile, the external picture on day 18 is compounding the internal pressure on Iran from multiple directions simultaneously. The EU foreign ministers met in Brussels and formally decided against expanding European naval operations around the Strait of Hormuz, despite Trump's repeated public pressure campaigns. Germany stated it has no intention of joining the U.S.-Israeli war under any circumstances. The EU foreign policy chief said European nations have no appetite to send troops. Trump called Iran a paper tiger in response. But let us look at what this paper tiger has actually accomplished. It has closed the world's most strategically important oil shipping lane for 18 consecutive days. It has raised global oil prices by 50% since February 28th, with Brent crude now sitting at its highest level since July 2022. It has forced the world's most powerful military alliance into a position where not one of its European members will publicly commit a single warship to the Strait of Hormuz. It has killed 13 American service members and wounded 200 more across 7 countries. It has hit the U.S. Embassy compound in Baghdad with drone and rocket fire. It has struck Dubai's airport and shut down the world's busiest international aviation hub. It has fired 700 missiles and 3,600 drones, while, according to its own military spokesman, not yet deploying its newest and most capable weapon systems. Whatever you call that, it is not the behavior of a paper tiger. U.S. Counterterrorism Director Joe Kent resigned today over this war. He was a retired Green Beret, a longtime Trump supporter, and a man who had spent his career fighting America's enemies. His resignation from the National Counterterrorism Center is a signal from inside the Trump national security apparatus that not everyone views this war's strategic trajectory as sound. Congressional Democrats have been demanding public hearings since week 1. A senator who attended a classified briefing told reporters the administration could not answer the basic question of what happens when the bombing stops and Iran rebuilds. And now the man who was the most plausible negotiating partner on the Iranian side, the one figure with both the authority and the pragmatic track record to potentially find a way out of this conflict, has been killed in his own capital. Trump said on Monday he does not know whether Iran's Supreme Leader Mojtaba Khamenei is alive or dead. He said that makes it difficult to figure out who America can negotiate with in Tehran. That statement was made before Larijani's killing. After it, the answer to Trump's question has become even more unclear. Trump delayed his planned summit with Chinese President Xi Jinping, which had been scheduled for March 31st, telling reporters we've got a war going on. A U.S. Navy warship carrying thousands of Marines and sailors has been tracked nearing the Malacca Strait off Singapore, heading toward the Middle East. Iraq's Kataib Hezbollah said its senior security commander, Abu Ali al-Askari, was killed today. A newborn baby 3 days old and his 2-year-old sister were killed along with their mother and grandmother in a strike on their home in the Iranian city of Arak. A tanker was struck by an unknown projectile near the Emirati port of Fujairah. Bahrain has neutralized 129 missiles and 221 drones since this war began. And in the Beirut suburb of Dahiyeh, Israeli airstrikes struck approximately 70 targets, including what the IDF described as Hezbollah command centers and the IRGC Air Force headquarters in Lebanon. Day 18. The war that was supposed to be over by now has just killed the man who was running Iran. And the next 48 hours will determine whether this killing moves the conflict toward its endgame or triggers the largest single escalation since February 28th. Because here is the brutal reality that nobody in Washington, Tel Aviv, or any Gulf capital can currently answer. Iran has been fighting this war for 18 days under a leadership structure that was already missing most of its original figures. It kept going. It kept firing. It kept blocking Hormuz. It kept striking Gulf states. It kept organizing rallies and making statements and presenting a face of defiance to the world. The regime has shown extraordinary institutional resilience through losses that would have collapsed most governments on the planet. The question is whether losing Larijani, the last truly irreplaceable figure in the post-February 28 Iranian power structure, is the blow that finally breaks that resilience, or whether it simply produces one more adaptation in a system built over 4 decades, specifically to survive exactly this kind of pressure. Trump says this war ends soon. Israel says it has thousands of targets left and plans through at least Passover, 3 weeks from now, with potentially 3 more weeks beyond that. Iran has not confirmed Larijani's death, published what may or may not be a recent handwritten note from him on social media, and has not said a single word publicly about what comes next. The silence from Tehran on this specific killing is the most important silence in the world right now. When it breaks, what Iran says and what Iran does will define whether this war has reached its turning point or whether Day 18 is simply the day it became something darker and more dangerous than anything we have seen before. Stay locked in, because the next 48 hours matter more than the previous 18 days combined. Subscribe right now, because this story moves faster than any single news cycle, and every development changes the picture. And tell me directly in the comments, do you believe killing Larijani brings this war closer to a deal, or does it make a massive Iranian retaliation inevitable?